And it looks like we are live, Samuel Tsuli. Thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Aaron. It is an honor.
It's my pleasure. For those of you not yet familiar with Samuel, you can find Samuel and his channel on YouTube at the SP Chef. And we're going to have a lot of fun today. I love speaking to people for the first time. Samuel, you were in the Cadet Org. Let's start with the basics. Let's start with, let me see. How old were you when you got into Scientology? I just can't remember if you were actually born in. How old were you when you or your family were introduced to Scientology? How long were you in, and how long have you been out now?
Okay, so I was born as the youngest child of 3 in a Scientology household. So both of my parents were Scientologists when I was born. And I mean, my mother, she actually got divorced about a year after I was born. And then she got a new husband fairly quickly. And he was a staff member also at the local org in Basel, which is in the north of Switzerland. So I grew up in it. Yeah.
Okay. Full blown, born and raised.
Yes.
And so when you were born, you were just born into a Scientology family. You weren't born into the Sea organization.
No, I was just a Scientology family. As far as I'm concerned, my mother was already a staff member. If she wasn't a staff member, my very earliest memories were of her just hanging out in the org. So, like working, helping out. So either she volunteered and eventually became a staff member, or she was always a staff member when I was already a child. And I grew up around it. And as a matter of fact, when I was 3 or 4 years old, we moved places, and we had a flat above the org. So I was living in the same building as the org. So I was always constantly around Scientology all the time. And my earliest memories are of doing courses, doing TRs with my brother when we argued, anything like that. So yeah, it's always been Scientology.
That's amazing. So the flat that you mentioned, living above the org, that was also in Basel, Switzerland?
That's right, yeah.
And how many years older is you have 2 siblings. Are they both brothers, or do you have a sister?
No, I've got a brother and a sister. My brother is 3 years older than I, and my sister's 4 years older than I.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you remember when those early years in the org, did you guys have a nursery in that org where all the kids were stored?
We're stored. No. I mean, I remember, I think when there were events, that there was like a place where the children would sort of hang out and just sort of being put away so they're not noisy during the event or anything like that. But other than that, no. I mean, as soon as I was quite, it didn't take me a very long time to learn to read. And as soon as I could, I could read very quickly. And I started doing courses as soon as I was able to do so. So always when I was in the org, I was doing courses. I was doing a lot of hours of book 1 auditing, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, from Dynetics, which happens to be today anniversary of Dynetics book, the 9th
Happy
of May.
Dynetics Day, Samuel.
Happy Dynetics. Yeah, thank you very much. You too. And so I did a lot of book 1 auditing, the kind of auditing that is described in the book, which is without using an e-meter, where you actually have to listen to what the person says and actually believe what the person says. Because when you have an e-meter, it doesn't really matter. Sure, you listen to what the PC says, but really you just look at what the needle does, and then you judge whether the PC is telling the truth or not upon the needle. And on book 1, you actually have to sort of believe the person. That's the main difference, really.
How young do you remember doing your first Scientology course?
Difficult to say. I hesitate to say 4. I think maybe 5. 5 is more, I think, more realistic. But it's difficult for me to know for sure, because when I was 4, I'm sure I already did TRs. I'm sure I already was writing down my overts that I committed against the family and whatever. And so yeah, I think maybe with 4, 5 years old is the first course that I did. Yeah.
You could write at 4?
Well, I mean, right. It's a little bit, whatever writing you would expect from a 4 years old, particularly writing OWs.
Right. I imagine kids writing down their OWs in pictures with crayons.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so I also remember doing the success through communication course when I was, I don't know, 5, 6, 7. Those early years are weird because I remember I was 4 years old when my mom started going to the Philadelphia org. But then
Yeah.
I have distinct memories of kindergarten. I don't know how the school age is compared to Europe, but 5 years old is generally kindergarten for me anyway. 6 years old is the first grade. 7 years old is second grade. And I have distinct memories of each one of those grades. I just don't remember how the memories of those grades correspond to my memories of being in the org. They don't necessarily marry up very well. But I remember,
Sure.
was the communication course one of the earliest things you did as a kid?
The communication course for children, for sure. Learning how to learn. That was, I'm sure, also one of the first ones. And after that, I did pretty much every communication course I could do because I was very awkward as a child, quite introverted, and I just didn't like talking to random people and stuff like that. And yeah, so I did pretty much every communication course I could do. I did lots of the volunteer minister, those mini courses. You could do like the individual small courses from that. Yeah, as I said, I did lots of TRs, and I was very good at bull baiting. Funny enough. So that took me often to do bull baiting. And then obviously book one auditing. And we did a lot of volunteer work for the local org. So we would go around and give out, say no to drugs, say yes to life booklets, way to happiness booklets. We had the yellow tents in our local town, and then we would be there, getting people to come in and so on and so forth as children. Yeah, definitely.
How old are you now, if you don't mind my asking?
How dare you? How very rude. I will be 32 this year. You don't ask a lady their age. But yeah, I'll be 32 this year.
And how
And to
long have you been
answer,
out of Scientology? But however you
right,
define that.
exactly. I mean, physically, I've been out of, because I was in a Sea Org and then I left in 2012. And then I think mentally, I would say, where I was able to say to myself, all right, I'm not a Scientologist anymore, would have been at the end of 2017.
I'm going to make
And
notes on this because
yes, of course.
I'm not
Mm,
ignoring you. I'm making notes. Okay. So,
sure.
and right now it's 2024. Okay.
Mm,
So you left the Sea Org, left SO 12 years ago, and
yeah.
you think kind of left Scientology like 7 years ago mentally.
Yeah. It took me some time. I think in 2015 was the first time where I sort of tipped my toe into the dangerous internet, and I went on YouTube and I started to watch a few little clips. But then there were some clips that sort of scared me off because I still very much believed in Scientology, and I just sort
Yeah.
of had to step back. And then back in maybe 2016, 2017, that's when I discovered your channel, actually. And you were doing lots of interviews at the time, and that was something that helped me a lot, because you talking to other Scientologists who either had a very similar experience, or even that talk about things that maybe didn't happen to me, but I knew exactly the way that it worked out for them, how it happened to them. It would have been exactly the same for me. And that made me sort of realize I'm not the weird one. Scientology is the weird one. Because, of course, before I would always tell myself, well, it's just, I just happened to be unlucky. The executives in my orgs, they were corrupt. They were not using the technology correctly and all of that. So I was always making excuses and gaslighting myself to no end. And then seeing those interviews sort of made me realize, oh, wow, actually, this is true. And there's one particular interview that you did with a fellow. His name was Joey Chait. Do you
Yeah.
remember that? Yeah,
Yeah.
and he and that interview was one that helped me quite a lot, because we had certain things in common, and yeah.
Wow. I was
Mm,
just telling you before we started, doing a lot more interviews is something I want to, I'm actively trying to get back into, because that is sort of what this channel was built on.
mm,
And I do feel that it is the kind of content that resonates most with people who are still under the radar, or, still in Scientology to some degree or another, but are starting to go onto the internet and explore. And the more familiar faces and familiar stories they have to connect with, and that will resonate with them, the better. That's amazing.
mm.
Um, okay, so if I'm doing my math correctly, you were born around 91, 92?
92, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. And at some point, your family joined the Sea Org. You said that you were in the Cadet Org in St. Hill. How did this happen with a mother and a stepfather and 3 kids? What happened here?
Right. Well, Scientology the Sea Org likes to send out little missions to orgs for various reasons, either not enough money, not enough book sales, or whatever it is, or of course recruitment. And this one lovely day, there was a mission with 3 Sea Org members that came to our org. I was 9 years old at the time, so my brother would have been 12, my sister 13, and they came and they saw us, running around, being in the course room or whatever. And they decided to recruit us for the Sea Org. So they first took my sister, maybe it took 15, 20 minutes, and then they took my brother, and then they took me. And we were put in this small little room. It was a room inside the building, so there were no windows. It was a desk, just enough space to walk past it, and then 2 chairs, and that's it. Maybe there was some furniture in the back or whatever. So a little bit of a sinister environment already. And then I don't know what they said to my sister, my brother, but what they told me, what I can somewhat remember is they would tell me, you've done all of these courses, you have written all of these wonderful success stories. Don't you want that other people experience that, and so on and so forth? And isn't that the most important thing in the world, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, what I do remember is that they basically told me I don't have to go to school. And I just basically said, all right, where do I sign? Because as a child, 9 years old, who wants to go to school? Thank you very much. Because they basically said, well, as you know, Samuel, you are an immortal being. Everything that you could learn, everything you could go and study about, you already have done in the past. But Scientology, this is the new thing. You can only get this, now, and so on and so forth. And so they were basically telling me wanted to go to study because I wanted to, I don't know if at 9 years old already wanted to go and study and become a professor or whatever. I already had thought about that already. I'm not sure. In any case, they already told me there's no point in going off and study and going to university because there's nothing greater than Scientology. And so I signed my Sea Org contract when I was 9 years old. But it took some years because first, my sister, a year later, when she was 14, she was then sent off to Copenhagen in Denmark to work there. And then 1 year later, my brother left when he was 14. And then when I was 13, instead of waiting until I was 14, they wanted us already, so me and my parents, to join the Sea Org. But there was not a Cadet Org in Denmark. And you had to be 14 to join the Sea Org in Denmark at the time, right? And so we ended up, my parents and I, going to St. Hill because there was the Cadet Org. So in 2005, that's when we left to St. Hill to join the Sea Org there. Yeah.
Wow. So and again, to be clear, this is your mom and your stepfather at this point, right?
Sure. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they ship your 2 older siblings off to Denmark because they were old enough to not have to be in the Cadet Org, just to be in the real Sea Org.
Yeah.
What was the urgency to get you in that they would send you to St. Hill where there was a Cadet Org instead of just waiting a little bit and sending you to Denmark?
I have no clue. And, for years, I actually I was beating myself up about this whole situation because I didn't know at the time it was because there was no Cadet Org in Denmark. I thought because when I was 12, my parents and we went to Denmark to visit my siblings and have a look at the environment and how it looks like there. And I was absolutely horrified by it because I went to my brother's dorm room, which was a tiny little room with several bunk beds. There was, as I recall, there was no window. Again, it was probably somewhere inside the building. There was no light fitting. There was no picture. There were no plants. It was just, it looked like a prison room from my child's view, right? And during the time when we was there, it was terrible weather. Where the org was located and the berthing, there were no trees. There was no nature. And I'm very much a nature guy. I'm very Swiss. I like to go hiking and so on and so forth. And so this was horrible. And I said this to my parents, this is horrible here. And then about a year later, when I was 13, we then went to St. Hill. And I thought for years that I actually split up the family. I ruined this whole family thing because the idea would have been we all would have been in Denmark. Naturally, obviously thinking about it, we wouldn't have had a happy time and always eating at the same time and always having on the same second Saturday a day off or whatever. That probably would not have happened. But I thought for a very long time that was the case until eventually I actually talked about that with my father, and then he told me, actually, no, it's because of the Cadet Org. But he didn't tell me why they couldn't have waited for another year for me to go to Denmark. So I'm not quite sure.
Wow. So, so 2005, you're 13 years old. You get sent off to St. Hill, England, to join the Sea Org. And by the way, well, you know, it sort of matches up with my experience. I was from 2002 to 2006. I was in the Sea Org in Los Angeles, and there very much was still a cadet org there. And there wasn't a lot of cadets. But even as of 2006, the Cadet Org there was still active. I think it's amazing that in 2005 in St. Hill, they were still bringing in new cadets. Do you remember how many cadets there were and what the ages approximately were?
There were less than 20, but
that's a lot. That's still a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I would say maybe 15, 14, something around that. And I ended up being in the Cadet Org until I was 16. I tried with 14 to do the EPF. I failed, and then I went back, and then with 16, I joined. And during this time, other cadets joined as well. There were more people who came in and joined. Obviously, some then obviously went off to do the EPF and so on and so forth. But yeah, there was, I would say, yeah, somewhere around 14, maybe even a little bit more than that at one point. You know, there were quite a few. Yeah. And ages, I wasn't the youngest. I think the youngest was 12 or maybe 11. And then the oldest would have been obviously 15, 16. Yeah.
Wow. I haven't asked you this before, whether this is something you're comfortable with or not comfortable with, but when I tell stories, I love naming names of the people who were there for the benefit of the people who may know these people.
Sure.
Do you want to name who the cadet IC was or any of the other cadets that were there with you?
I don't mind naming the adults. I don't feel comfortable naming the children that were there unless you know they ended up being you know what. But no, the adults. So we had Kimberly Bradford, or Kim as we would call her. She was the cadet IC. And then during my time when I was in the Cadet Org, something happened. I heard a rumor she had a rock slam. I don't know. In any case, she ended up in the RPF. And then we had a lady take over. Her name was Angela Paris. And she was formerly the Cadet IC years and years and years ago. And actually heard recently that, recently, I heard it a few years ago, she passed away from cancer. But Angela Paris, she was then afterwards the Cadet IC. And then we had a school IC, because obviously we had also a cadet school. And her name was Regine Kreiser. She was a German lady. And as far as I know, she's still around. I don't know. She was born on the 26th of March, either 36 or 38. But she was very, very, active. So I wouldn't be surprised if she's still kicking now.
How do you know her birthday?
I know her birthday because we had a very close, a very deep connection, particularly because of music and because she had a car. And then sometimes, I had crazy hours when I was we all had crazy hours naturally in the Sea Org, but later on I became the cook, and so I started before AOSH woke up, obviously, because I had to be in the kitchen to do breakfast. But then I went home usually with CLO, CMO. And sometimes she would be, and I'm sure it was the same with you, in the evening when the senior said, all right, now you can go home. I mean, it was like pigs at the pigs trough. They're just running for the buses, to get on the bus as quick as possible. And sometimes Regina, she would be there with her car because she had a car, and then she would always take me, and we would drive particularly slowly to listen to music and talk about music. So we have a very deep connection. So I have lots of great memories from her. So I just remember her birthday probably because of that. Yeah.
That's amazing. So you mentioned Angela Paris. I think Angela Paris is the mother of Valeska Paris and Melissa Paris.
Could be. I'm not sure. I mean, Paris isn't a very common surname. I haven't ever heard it anywhere outside of Angela Paris. So it could be, yeah.
Was she French or Swiss?
No, she was very much English, very much English. But I think her father or her grandfather was French.
Yeah, I'm looking at a write-up online, and Angela Paris is definitely Melissa and Valeska's mother. That's incredible.
Oh, wow. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Okay, I want to take half a step backwards to something I made a note
Sure.
of. You mentioned doing the Dianetics Book One auditing when you were a kid. Was that giving
Yeah.
or receiving?
Both. I was giving and receiving, but it wasn't as bad as you might think, because I was doing it with another child. Her name was
Oh,
Jessica. And it's actually funny thinking about it, because, you know, when you're in it, you just are convinced it works and it's great and whatever. However, I do remember that her and we worked something out that, you know, when it was 10 minutes before break time, either I would nudge her on the foot or she would nudge me on the foot, and then you're right, we need to wrap this up so we can go on break, right? So then we would start laughing. Oh, that's so great. I feel so relieved now. Right, okay, break time. Oh, 5 minutes before break. And then the supervisor would say, all right, you might as well go off to break now. So we would do that, right? And somehow we would still think it worked and was great or whatever. I mean, I don't know what she thought about it, but I would say to myself, you know, clearly it helps others. Maybe it just didn't help me. Maybe I'm just a bit broken up there, so that's why it didn't work, or I didn't gain really so much out of it. But yeah, so I was doing it with other children. I never did it with an adult, thankfully.
that's good to know. I mean, if you're
Yeah,
doing that procedure child on child, it's hard to imagine that going very, very badly. But if you were having to do that on an adult, that would be
yeah,
absolutely horrific as far as what
yeah,
you would be exposed to.
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Because for the viewers, I mean, doing that procedure of Dianetics auditing, the entire purpose of doing it is to recall moments of pain and unconsciousness
yeah,
and severe physical and emotional pain, and to
yeah,
recount this over and over and over again. But as kids,
yeah.
what kind of stuff do you remember going over with Dianetics auditing? Were you doing past life memories and everything?
No, because you see, uh, do you remember in Dynetics, it doesn't talk about past lives, because Hubbard
Right.
hasn't actually discovered that yet. You know, he only talks about, you know, memories that you have as a baby in your mother's belly. You know, that sort of thing. Like your mother, she bends over and she bumps her belly on the table or whatever. You know, that is something you could remember, but not further than that. That came a little later, so we didn't go into Crazy Town quite that way. I don't remember. Honestly, I don't remember anything. But it would have been very innocent things like falling over or getting a paper cut, or I don't know. I did get bullied a bit in school, so probably a little bit about that, or I don't know, something like things like that. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't help but wonder whether your memories of that, of doing that as a child, do you remember it being something you felt like you had to do, or was it kind of something you guys were having fun with in some way?
No, it was always in the back of my mind. It was always, I have to do this. This is duty. This is what my parents expect. I always had this. I always wanted to make my parents proud, that they, you know, say good job, well done, or whatever, you know, and being also affirmed by everybody else at graduation when you hold up your certificate, you know. Something I don't think I told you, because we had a brief little chat, you know, before we went on. I actually did my Purif, and when I was a child, and when I finished my Purif, I remember distinct, because I don't remember how old I was when I did the Purif. I generally do not. I remember when I was 8 years old. The somebody in the technical department decided it would be great if Samuel does the Purif now, because I've done all of these courses already, and clearly I'm full of drugs, so naturally I need to do the Purif now. And I don't remember if it was approved, because Hubbard says auditing you can only start at the age of 10, and for some reason the Purif falls into the auditing, probably because it's on the bridge, and so she had to write a
Right.
CSW and send it up, probably to flag or wherever. And I don't remember, was it approved, was it disapproved. In any case, what I do remember is when I finished the Purif, I held up my certificate and I was announced as the youngest person to ever have done the Purif in Europe, right? So these things like that, to get them to be applauded at, and, you know, having this little crown of being the youngest person to do this horrible thing that I had a horrible experience doing the Purif. These things are the things I needed to have to feel valuable, to feel like I have value, to feel I meant something to somebody somewhere, because there was no other way. And you know, I think there were sometimes moments where I mean, twice actually, I ran away from home, but it was, like a pathetic attempt. You take a suitcase that's way too large and you throw just random stuff in there that you don't even need, and you just sort of bossily walk out. I did do that twice, and my mother, she said very clearly, when these sort of things happen, or if I didn't want to go to course, I didn't want to finish it, I didn't want to go to do word clearing or whatever, she would say, well, you chose this family, you chose this body. And then once I even asked her, well, why would you say that? Like, how do you know that? And then she said, apparently, I told her this before I was even able to speak. So how I did that, I don't know. Maybe I drooled a certain way, and then she decided, oh, right, I wanted to be here. So she would always use that to say it was my fault to be there. And she made it very clear that if I don't do this, she will see me less than. So I had to do these courses all the time, always pretend to be happy, always smile, always be VGIs, because you can't look downstat, you can add a downtone, you can't look sad or anything like that, because if you're sad, it means there's something wrong with you. And if there's something wrong with you, then that would imply that Scientology isn't working, because you're doing so much Scientology, right? So you always have to look happy and pretend everything is fine. And the problem in that really is that everybody probably is doing that. And you look at other people and they look all happy, so you think you're the weird one, but actually everybody's miserable, but they just pretend.
Yeah. That is wild. The ultimate Scientology gaslighting technique. A child's like, I didn't choose to be born. And like, actually, you did. Yeah. You don't remember it, but we had this telepathic communication where I got in touch with you, and you indicated that you wanted this body. So there you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. Okay. So you end up in St. Hill.
Yeah.
It's about, I like trying to correlate ages and dates here. It's was it 2005? You're 13 years old.
Yeah.
2005. You're in the Cadet Org for like three plus years. Do you see any of your siblings in Denmark during this time?
Let me see. I remember that my sister came over. I think she had just gotten married, and then I think either she with her husband, she came over to St. Hill. I don't know if I was still in the Cadet Org or if I had already joined. I don't recall, but I just saw her one time. I mean, if I say I'm now 20, how old am I again? I'm 32 years old. 20. I'm 32 years old, and between the age of 12 and now 32, I have seen her maybe altogether 7 times, 8 times, something like that. And most of that time, obviously, outside of the Sea Org. And as I was saying, in the Cadet Org, maybe she came then over, or maybe when I was already in the Sea Org. But I didn't see my brother during my time when I was in the Sea Org. We had a little communication there with letters, because we didn't have email. At some point later on, we all managed to get an email address that was almost like a PR thing to be in touch with family, because there were several PR flaps. So we all got a very secure email address. But other than that, we wrote some letters or something. But I never saw my brother during the time when I was in the Sea Org or the Cadet Org.
Wow. Are your siblings still in the Sea Org or Scientology?
No, no and yes. Both of my siblings have left the Sea Org, but they are still very much Scientologists. Yeah. Although I have tried to speak to them and sort of like drop seeds, and let them, take root or whatever, but it hasn't really worked much so far. Yeah.
And I assume your mom is still in?
As far as I know, she's still at St. Hill, yeah.
In the Sea Org?
In the Sea Org, yeah.
Do you want to say her name?
Sure. Well, Susanna. Her name is Susanna. Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously, also like me, Zuli.
Susanna
unless
Zuli.
she remarried, I wouldn't know.
The only other Zuli I know in Scientology is a guy named Hans Zuli, who I'm not sure if he's alive or not. I never knew him. I just know him as someone who gets mentioned as a senior Scientology executive. I can't remember if he was RTC or if he was Gold, but any relation to Hans Zuli?
Not that I'm aware of, but do you know when he was around? Because
Forever, just forever. He's
because
like, just go ahead.
sorry, my genetical father, his name is Christian Sully, and he was actually in the Office of Special Affairs.
Yes,
back in the
Han
day.
Suli was like a big OSA guy back in the day, I believe.
Well, my genetical father, his name is Christian
Sully.
Christian Sully, and I don't know Hans. I don't know. I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know if this is just in my family, but I don't really know my family. I don't know. There might have been a Hans Sully. I've never talked to my genetical father with Christian. I've never talked about him in his time in the Sea Org. I only found out about this through my brother. He just sort of casually mentioned, "Oh yeah, he was in the Office of Special Affairs a few years ago." He just mentioned that. I had no idea about that. So I don't know. Maybe that is a cousin of his. I have no clue.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So to anyone in the live chat, please let us know in the live chat. Barb's in the back office helping us star comments. If anyone in the live chat knows whether Hans Sully is related to Christian Sully.
Mm-hmm.
So Christian Sully is your biological father.
That's right.
Approximately how old would your biological father be?
Well, he is born in 58, and so he would be 65. 65.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Han Suli. Oh, actually, oh my God. No, I'm thinking Han Suli might actually be Han Suli's first name instead of Hans Sully. It might be Han Suli something.
Oh, I see. Well, there you go. That's the plot twist. Okay.
So if anyone in the live chat knows more about this, Hans Uli Stali. Hans Uli Stali is the person I was thinking of. Hans Uli Stali. Okay. False alarm.
All right, never mind.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so you're the only member of your family who's out of Scientology.
Completely out. Oh, and by the way, my stepfather, he also left the Sea Org, but he's still a Scientologist. Yeah, but I'm the only one, who's completely out, have spoken out, and yeah.
Do you know if you're officially declared?
No, I don't think I am. I don't know. I know there's been some troubles because I did my coming out video, on YouTube for having been an ex-Scientologist and ex-Sea Org member and all of that jazz, was on Jeff's channel from PTS for Life. This was back in December or November of last year, and then some months later, my brother-in-law, so the husband of my sister, he called me and he said, "Oh, I was on YouTube and suddenly, I saw a picture of you. Oh, very strange." Like literally like that. And you thought to yourself, they always say the same thing, right? "Oh, I just happened to see it. It just happened to be there, and I saw this. And are you aware that's there? Did you consent for this to be there?" And I had to explain to him, "Yes, darling, this was a live. So this is happening, right then and there, right? We're not using, letters or anything like that, right then and there." And I told him, "Yes, I'm very happy it's there." And then I asked him, of course, "Did you watch it? What did you think about it? If you have anything to criticize about it, please let me know. If I said something wrong, correct me." Naturally, didn't watch it. And then, you won't believe it, a month later, I got a KR. I got a knowledge report written on me by him. And it was sent to me and to my local org, and he knows I'm out of Scientology. I've said, we've talked about it. I'm out of Scientology. I don't want to have anything to do with it, and so on and so forth. So why would he send me a KR as if I would care about that? But of course he cares because he does it to protect himself. He wants to make sure he protects himself. So Scientology knows that he, told me off for it, so that he doesn't get in trouble. And then after that, we had a little bit of back and forth with text messages. And he basically, along with my sister, disconnected from me. So and when that happened, that was sort of the push to make my own channel now. And, Jeff has been encouraging me, "Come on, do the channel. And I was very hesitant, not necessarily because of the disconnection, but more other things like, what am I going to do it about? I don't have a professional setup. I don't know what to do, and so on and so forth. And he said, "Darling, don't worry about it. Just get yourself a good mic and the rest just will follow." And ever since, I've been doing videos about all sorts of things. And it's just a matter of time until my brother will disconnect from me. And I mean, when that will happen, that will be very difficult for me because we're actually quite close. My sister, I'm very sorry to say, I just don't really know her all that well. And so when the disconnection happened, of course it hurt, but it's not going to be, it's going to be so much more severe when my brother, because, particularly because recently I discovered a whole bunch of old pictures of me and him, when we were small children. And it's, we were close as children. And then now, rediscovering our brotherhood, so to speak, having been both out of the Sea Org, we do see each other every once in a while. That would be difficult, but I know it's going to happen. It's going to happen eventually. Same with my stepfather, because he will have to choose between one child or, 2 children. Who is he not going to talk to, right? So I know this is going to happen eventually. So I thought, F it, just do the channel now. And because, as I said, those interviews that you did, they helped me very much. So I want to do interviews like that. I want to talk about it on my channel. I also have some videos which I did in German, because Scientology is obviously shrinking, but it's internationally, it's all over the place, and there's just, as far as I'm aware, not so much German, Swiss presence on YouTube. So I do want to do that as well. And
That's great. I think there's a huge untapped opportunity for foreign language Scientology content. And I was talking to someone, actually a French Canadian, who wanted to start a channel but wasn't sure what he could do. And I said, if you just want to take my videos and dub them over in French, I'm totally okay with that. Just some like, you know what I mean? Like, there's so much content being created.
Oh, yeah.
I cannot help but be pissed off on your behalf that your parents took you to join the Sea Org in a different country than where your siblings were. That just seems like, honestly, the stupidest thing you could do to a child. I mean, I've been sitting over here thinking about it. I kind of can't get over it.
I'm also quite pissed off about my genetical father, Christian, right? Because he was in the Sea Org, right? And then he left the Sea Org. He met my mother. He contributed his 5 minutes or whatever to create us 3 children. And then he just didn't really care. He didn't really look after. And then when we left, or when we were leaving, he didn't do anything. He didn't say, stop, I want them to finish school. And then when they finish school, or when they're adults or whatever, then they can decide. No, he just didn't do anything. He didn't care. I'm talking about it from my point of view. I don't know how the law was back then in regards to when you're divorced, because I think back then in 92, 93, it wasn't that common to have shared custody, So I'm not sure if my mother was completely solely responsible and he legally had absolutely nothing to say. I don't know that. But I'm sure if he really cared, he could have gone to a news reporter. He could have gone, done something to make sure his children at least finished school before they left for the Sea Org, but he didn't do anything. So that's something where I'm also kind of pissed off about, but it is what it is.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so as much as you choose to get into here, this 3+ years in the Cadet Org, what can you say about that?
Well, during the time we were doing lots of so-called missions, and in missions in the Cadet Org would be cleaning. So we would clean the common areas. We had a library and so on and so forth. We had, I think, certain rooms from officers we would also clean. And then we would do the laundry from Sea Org members, because they didn't have time to do the laundry oftentimes. So they would give the laundry to the cadets and they would do it. And then we would get like £2, £3, to do the laundry. So this was a little income that we had. And during my time in the Cadet Org, I was actually stationed in the 2nd division, promotion and marketing, right? I don't actually remember. Promotion marketing.
Dissemination.
Oh, dissemination. But I was put in basically making money. And I basically became the baker. I baked cakes and cookies and flapjacks, and I made pancakes. And I would sell them in the evening to the Sea Org member to make money for the cadets. Because we cadets didn't get any other source of income. In theory, Hubbard said that the Cadet Org is part of CLO, Continental Liaison Office, and we were supposed to get a pay directly from CLO, obviously reduced, but we were supposed to get a pay. But the income in CLO was so terrible, like they couldn't afford to give us anything, so we had to make our own money. And that became my job in the Cadet Org, to do cookies, flapjacks, pancakes, and so on and so forth, and then sell them in the evening when the SIG members would come home, because our berthing where we lived was in Crowborough in Walsh Manor, which is about 20 minutes drive from St. Hill. And then they would leave there every morning and then come back in the evening, and then we would sell them that stuff. So that's what we would do. And naturally, we would go to St. Hill to do courses. And I mentioned it earlier, we had a cadet school. So we had school every day. I think the schedule went something like we would start at 9 o'clock in the morning was the school. So first we had to, at 8 o'clock in the morning, I think 7:30 in the morning, we had morning muster. Then we had cleaning station. Then we had breakfast. And then at 9 o'clock, I think, was when school would start. And then it would go until maybe 3:15, 3:30 in the afternoon. And then there was a bus that would drive the people who would go to St. Hill, and the rest of the children, they would stay to do manual labor around the estates. Particularly also during the IS event, we would be sent off to St. Hill all the time to help in the tent, to set it up, to put out all the chairs and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's the sort of thing we would do. Yeah.
So when you say the kids were living in this place about 20-minute drive from St. Hill, is that also where the adults lived?
Yeah, where everybody lived. Everybody apart from very few people who would stay at the property of St. Hill.
Wow, yeah. That's crazy. 20-minute drive away from the base is where the Sea Org members live. Yeah. That's wild. That's different than the States.
How is it in the States? Is it further away?
Well, in LA, they literally like either live and work in the same building, or it's like maybe a 5-minute drive. At Flag, here in Clearwater, at Flag, it's much less than a 10-minute drive to the base. I guess 20 minutes is like, what's the big deal? I don't know. A 20-minute drive for a Sea Org member to and from sounds like a lot.
It was a big deal during winter, because this is a very rural area. I mean, it was so rural, we would have sheep just sitting on the road, right? And then you just had to wait, or you had to honk, because you're not allowed to touch a sheep, you're not allowed to legally push them. So you just have to wait until they move. And so during winter, sometimes we had a couple of winters where there was so much snow, it took 2 hours to get to St. Hill. So
are the sheep a protected species?
No, they're not protected, but you're not allowed to touch them because, they belong to the farmer. And I don't know exactly why you can't, sort of shove them away or whatever, but you're not allowed to do that. You can only honk at them, and then hopefully they will get annoyed and then move, But
I was going to say, you're not allowed to touch the sheep. Somebody should tell that to those poor sheep in New Zealand. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. Well. I've just heard stories. Okay. So, now one of the things that would happen with the cadets in Los Angeles is they were considered, when people were doing their auditor training and they needed to audit people on certain actions in order to finish their courses, they would use the cadets as a pool of people to audit. Did that happen to you guys?
It happened, but not particularly to me, I have to say. I think that is just speculation on my part, why I wasn't really used all them. I was used still very often for doing TRs, because I was just shameless as a child. I don't care if it was an 80-year-old woman in front of me, or if it was another child. I would just act as obnoxiously as I could, so they would use me for that. But for auditing and stuff, I don't recall really being used. And I think that's because very briefly, when I was still in Basel in Switzerland, I must have been maybe 11, 12 years old. I was I was given an auditing session. I was doing a guy was doing tiers and objectives, and he had to do one of those auditing drills where, look at the wall, thank you. Walk over to the wall, thank you. Touch the wall, thank you. Turn around, thank you, and so on and so forth, and do that for hours. And he had to do that with me. He didn't have a twin, or maybe the twin was on holiday or whatever. And I was in this room for hours and hours and hours, and I was going completely psychotic. I was completely mental. I was crying. I was like beaten. I was like a broken horse. at the end, I was just walking along in apathy, and I couldn't get any happier, of course, because I was completely dead. I was dead inside, and they just finished. They just said, "Okay, stop." Somebody came in eventually, and they just stopped it. It was never handled. It was never done. And I remember when I was in a Cadet Org, I then went on to the TIA's objectives, and everything was fine. And then the moment where I had to do the objectives, after 10 minutes, I would just completely, it would just come back to me. And I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do it. And so I was blocked. I couldn't do it. And I think that is the reason why I was never used in any of these drills or whatever. The other cadets, I'm sure they were, but I couldn't speak to that,
Oh, there might have been something in your PC folder that made them be like, let's not use Samuel for the auditing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I tell various parts of my story, I try to explain how I dodged a lot of bullets in various ways. And one of those ways is, in my entire time in Scientology, I never had to do objectives auditing, ever. I've never received any objectives auditing. And having witnessed so many people doing and receiving those auditing processes in the co-audit spaces where everyone can see and everyone can hear, it's one of those things that made me honestly terrified of doing auditing, because I was like, if I do auditing, I will eventually have to do that, and I don't want to do that. God damn. There's so many discussions that could and should be had about children doing objectives auditing and both giving and receiving. Geez. Okay. So the cadets were really used as a labor force. It's funny when you say you guys went to school from 9 to 3, because that's actually a pretty normal school schedule in the real world. Was that 5 days a week?
It was 5 days a week. That's right. On the weekends, we would work the whole day. Usually again at Walsh Manor. I mean, we would do, as I said, cleaning and things. That's what we mainly did, but we also helped in the gardens, doing a little bit in estates, fixing things. There was one cadet, he was very good at fixing like light fixtures or the plugs and things like electrical things like that. So that he would be put on missions to do these sort of things, right, as a child. And thankfully, nothing ever happened. But yeah, also when we were doing the IS event, we were sent off to help set up the tent. We would carry those huge stacks of chairs around. A very funny story, actually. One year when we were setting up the chairs, we were all given a wooden stick. So three cadets of us were given a wooden stick, and we used this wooden stick to measure out the distance of the chairs. They were all equal from back to back. You know what I mean? So they were all equal on the same road. And us three cadets, we figured out fairly quickly that each stick had a different length, right? So basically, and we thought to ourselves, well, okay, we don't have to carry anything. It's easy work. So let's just do it the whole day. And we literally went all day. I would go first, for example, do it, and then the next one would go, and then he would change it, because obviously his stick was slightly longer or shorter or whatever, and we just do this the whole day. So yeah.
Was there any way in which you kids were just allowed to be kids, or was the whole idea no, you have to be productive? Production is the basis of morale.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We would also do Chinese school, and it was very much drilled. No slacking, no standing around. There's always something to do. And we were very, very busy KR writer. I know you were a very busy KR writer, but during the Cadet Doctor, goodness gracious, we wrote chaos after chaos, and the most petty of things, or like things that shouldn't be a report, or annoyance report and things like that. And and conditions. I had to do quite often condition. Well, quite often. It happened quite frequently, particularly doubt. I had to do doubt quite often. Well, surely 5-6 times I had to do doubt. Yeah, during my time in the Cadet Org. Yeah.
People who've watched a whole bunch of my videos will remember me talking about the difference between a knowledge report, where you have to send a copy to the person you're reporting, and then things that shouldn't be a report, where you don't send a copy. At that young age, were you guys aware of the strategic differences between those reports?
No, because I remember the discussion was there that actually not allowed to write a KR, if the person is not under investigation. I don't think the word is investigation. It was a different, like the person has to be like not necessarily in a committee of evidence, but there has to be like a statement he will be in a committee of evidence. That's why we need knowledge reports to gather information. It was something along those lines says in the policy when you write a KR, but most SEAL members just ignore that and just wrote KR all the time. And then, I think when that argument came up, we would just take any other of those 30 different reports or whatever they are in that Hubbard wrote about, and it would just write a report like that. Yeah, I don't think we were aware that one, that one would get, the person would get, the other they wouldn't get, or I don't remember that. No.
It's funny. This is one of those an example of one of those things where the definitions and the instructions of knowledge reports are different in different policies. So there's the policy letter, reports types of, that lists like, I don't know, 80 different types of reports. And in that policy letter, the knowledge report is defined in the way that you just said, where it's something that's being used when there's an investigation going on. But then there's the policy letter just called knowledge reports that makes it clear it's a free for all. Everyone should be writing knowledge reports on everybody all the time. Right. Okay. So is there anything else that you want to mention or discuss about the Cadet Org before we move on to you actually joining the Sea Org proper?
Nothing. I mean, there's a funny little story how I met David Miscavige, if you want to hear that.
Oh, please.
Oh, please. So this was during this incident when we were in the tent for the IS event. So I want to say so I joined 2005. So this would have been in the same year, actually. It would have been in 2005 because I wasn't able to speak English yet, or very little, So I joined in September 2005, and the IS event would have been a month or so later in October. And so we were there with the sticks and doing that. And then suddenly I feel a tap on my shoulder. So I turn around and look slightly down. And there was a man there. And then he was saying something, take a break. And I thought, oh, great. And then I turned to this lady who gave us the project to do this. And she was running towards me. And then she was shaking her hands and saying, no, they need to finish this. And then this man repeated whatever he said very calmly. And then you could see her like, of course, yes, go right ahead. And then we took a break. I thought, okay, great, thanks. And I just wandered off. And then the two other cadets, they came to me, oh my God, you just talked to David Miscavige. And I thought, well, and who's that exactly? I had no clue who this guy was. No clue. And then obviously later on when I saw the IS event, I realized, okay, he's obviously someone important. But I didn't know. Even though I grew up in Scientology, I didn't know. I didn't recognize him at all.
So you were a child.
13.
And you had to turn around and you had to look slightly down.
Just
see David Miscavige. Yes, that's amazing how that works.
I was tall for my age, yeah.
How tall are you now?
I don't know in feet. I'm 178 in centimeters. So anyone in the chat, if you can translate that into feet, or maybe Aaron.
Yeah. 5'8". 5'8".
Okay,
Yes. Well, he's 5'1". So yeah, you'd have to look. Way down. Yeah. All right. So let's see. Okay. So you join. Oh wait, no. Okay. Here's the last question I wanted to ask you about the Cadet Org.
Sure.
To the best of your knowledge, what is the latest memory? Because I want to tie this to an actual year. The latest memory you have that we could say on the record, there were still cadets in the Sea Org based on your personal firsthand experience.
2012. Right on the day when I left. I left 17th of December.
Okay. And it's not, and to the best of your knowledge, were they trying to get rid of the Cadet Org, or you don't know? It was just there.
I didn't hear any of that. I didn't hear like, recruiters, there was no issues about, recruiters, please make sure they're at least 16 or anything like that. I didn't hear anything of that. However, I did actually, on my channel, just to shamelessly self-promote, I actually did a video talking about my time in the Cadet Org, and I actually took out a document where I show an inspection that happened. There was actually an inspector came to inspect the school to make sure it was all okay. And I remember that. And I thought to myself, surely there must be a report somewhere, because this was an actual inspection. I found the report. And then looking at that report, I actually found out the school closed. I believe it was in 2016. So the cadet school, the Walsh Manor School, that's how it's called. Walsh Manor is the name of the birthing. It closed in 2016, and I'm assuming that because of that, they did not recruit any more children under the age of 16, unless they decided to send them off to another school, a public school of some sort. But I just couldn't imagine them doing that.
Wow. Some other time, let's do a video about that together. I would like to look
Sure.
at that report.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Okay, so at this time, you're in the Cadet Org. And so for those years that you're in the Cadet Org, your mom and your stepdad, they're in the Sea Org proper. They're working at St. Hill.
Yeah. My mother, she joined right away, and she was done with the EPF like that because she was a supervisor, fast flow, and all of that. And then my father, my stepfather, he came a couple of months later because he had to take care of the flat, of the whatever furnitures we still had, and so on and so forth. And then he came after that, and then he joined. And my mother, she ended up being in the it's funny how the terms, I don't remember all the terms. The HGC.
Yep.
The HGC, she was supervisor there. And my father, he ended up in CLO in the small office where all the front groups offices are, SMI and iHelp and all of that. He was working.
He was probably the ED Able. He worked in Able.
He worked in Able, yeah.
Yeah, which is the Association for Better Living and Education, which is kind of the umbrella organization that's over a lot of the front groups like Applied Scholastics, Narconon, Criminon, Way to Happiness, and all those kind of things. And the ABLE office is usually a very small office of any from 1 to 3 people. So so your mom? Oh, it sounds like she might have been the director of processing, perhaps. If she was over the HGC, if she was one of the supervisors of the the person who's over the HGC is the.
Yeah. She was one of the supervisors of the HGC. That's right. Yeah. So yeah, probably.
Did you see your parents often while you were in the Cadet Org? Did you see them every day?
No, I didn't. I don't actually really remember it. I think I was quite glad to have this freedom because you were treated as an adult. And as a child, you crave that in a certain way, to be taken seriously, to be respected in that way, and not sort of like mollycoddled or whatever. And so I don't recall longing really. And I know this sounds awful saying this, but I didn't, it took me years to realize that I was actually always scared of my mother. I was always scared of her. And because I thought for years that this feeling I had was respect towards her, that I had respect towards her, and I need to make her proud, and so on and so forth. And then later on, when I came out of the Sea Org and I started to work in the normal world, and I had bosses who actually were respectful, they actually did what they demanded, that they had a certain standard and they uphold the standard, and so on and so forth, and they were very fair, and so on and so forth. I realized, no, this feeling I have towards them, that's respect. And what I had towards my mother all these years is just fear. And so when I had this opportunity being separated from her in the Cadet Org, I think I really took advantage of that. And I didn't see her very often. Every once in a while, I would see her. Well, every week, to be fair, every week I would see her on Saturday, because on Saturday morning we had CSP, Cleaning of the Ship project. And so we all had a huge muster, so we were all there. So I would see her then. But other than that, during the week, not really. I don't recall. Every once in a while, sure, but not really.
But if the cadets were living in the same place that the adult Sea Org members were living, why would you guys not have seen each other daily?
Because generally speaking, the cadets, they would stay at Walsh Manor where the birthing is, and then do the missions there, cleaning and whatever. My mother, she would be then and the other parents, they would be at St. Hill working there. And then our schedule to go to bed was, I think we had to, lights out was 9:30 in the evening, I think, maybe 10 o'clock. I'm not sure. And AOSH, my mother was in AOSH, she worked until 10 o'clock and then would be home at the latest 10:30, right? And so I was already in bed. And so it was not permitted, basically, because lights had to be out. You were not, it could be that I sneakily, I went out and then I did see my mother afterwards or something. And of course, in the evenings, on those evenings where I would sell the goods, where I would sell the cookies, the cakes, and so on and so forth, then we would see each other like that, sure. But I don't remember going out of my way to try to look for her, try to see her, insist, talking to the cadet I see or whatever, I need more time with my mother or anything like that. I mean, she was gone also for some time doing training. And another thing I would like to mention, going back years and years and years, when I was shortly after I was born, my parents, they divorced. I was about a year and a half old when my mother, the org decided to send her off to Flag for training. Okay. So she had just met what then became a stepfather. And he was in his 20s, right? And then she decided, okay, I'm going to go to Flag. And originally, this was going to be 3 months. She ended up being there for 2.5 years. So she left her children. Like, she left me. I was 1.5 years old. My brother, he maybe just went to kindergarten. I'm not sure. My sister, she may have just started school. And she just sort of dropped them off with a stranger, basically, in his 20s, never had children himself, just said bye and just effed off to America to do her training. I mean, 3 months is already outrageous, but she was there for 2.5 years. And then, I mean, that is sort of how I saw her always. I always saw her as, well, she's just my nanny. She's just my caretaker. Why would I see her as differently as that? And her priority were always Scientology, then money, and money being money to do Scientology or whatever, and then everything else. I mean, for example, her family, I never met her family. I mean, I think when I was born, they sort of showed me as a baby to her parents, but other than that, I never saw them. They were declared as SPs, I think before I was even born. And, she had disconnected with them already. I mean, declared as SPs, they were never Scientologists themselves, but they were antagonistic. They said something bad, and then she decided to disconnect for them. So I never even met her family. And I never had, I don't know how this was for you with your parents, but I never had an actual conversation ever with my mother. What I mean by that is, I come home from school or somebody bullied me or whatever, and I would say, Mom, this happened. And then she would say, well, this is what happened when I was a child, or she would give me her advice. She would say, well, let's see what Hubbard says. And then she would take one of those bloody green volumes out of the shelf and talk to me via Hubbard. She never, I don't know anything about her, really. I don't know anything about her, and I always saw her really in a way as my nanny, just somebody hired, and I always felt a little bit like a burden to her. I don't know if she was like this just to me, or if she was like this with my other siblings, but I always felt like I was annoying her. I was in her way or whatever. And that is just, and then again, when I was then in the Cadet Org, I had this freedom of not having to be with her anymore. And so I didn't really seek out that connection, really. And yeah.
Wow. Luckily, my Scientology exposure as a child, or the amount of Scientology my mom used on us as a child, was, to my recollection, mostly limited to contact assists, nerve assists, OW write-ups. I don't even remember having to do lower conditions, but my younger brother, who has a different father than I do, his father made him do lower conditions all the time and things like that. I don't remember my mom ever busting out books or policy volumes or anything like that. Yeah. Thank goodness. But like, my little brother would be assigned lower conditions for things like, he accidentally left the gate of the fence open and the dog might have possibly gotten out, but didn't get out.
Yeah. Sure.
Treason. Go start writing your OWs. Like, honestly, just treating a child as an object, really, you know? Now, I know when some people hear you talking about having to bake goods as a cadet to earn money, I know there's a lot of people that go, why do kids have to earn, why do kids have to earn money? Isn't everything being provided for them? What was the need for the kids to figure out ways to earn money?
Well, it was for cadet uniform, to buy uniform, right? And just to have a little bit of pocket money, because we didn't have any other sorts of pocket money. I don't remember what our pay was, but it was less than £10, I'm sure. I don't know what £10 is. That's probably about $12 or something. It was less than that, I'm sure, the pay. I mean, eventually, because when I first started working there, in the Cadet Org, we didn't have any pay. I don't think we had a uniform yet. I want to credit where credit is due, but my baking got in quite a lot of income, and then we were able to have uniforms. I don't remember if we've got properly regularly pay while I was in the Cadet Org or after I had already left the Cadet Org and I joined the Sea Org. I don't remember that, but for the majority of the time we didn't have pay, or if anything, like £2 or £3, something like that. Yeah.
Was there ever any problem with eating and things like this?
No. We had an incredibly lovely person. Her name was Cheryl Laws. She is an old timer, and I'm sure there's many people who know her. She was actually the nanny of David Miscavige back in the day. And Cheryl Law, she was this MLO, Medical Liaison Officer, and she was stationed at Walsh Manor. And she would be the one taking care of us kids in regards to food. And she would always do her best. She would even use she would get a small amount of money, which was allocated to her by CLO, right? But it was never really enough. And so she would use her own pay to buy ingredients to make sure that us kids, we had food. So I was never lacking in food. I always had enough food, and that's for sure. Yeah.
Wow. It's amazing to see the difference between what an individual person who cares can do compared to the organization that really didn't give a damn about cutting the financial allocation for the cadet food money,
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Okay, so eventually you're old enough, you do the EPF, which is basically the Sea Org boot camp. It's the Estates Project Force. What do you want to talk about regarding, we don't necessarily have to talk about the EPF itself, but
sure.
Once you got into the Sea Org proper, how many years did you spend in the Sea Org proper before leaving?
4 years. So from 2008 until 2012.
Okay. So what about that experience do you want to talk about?
The Sea Org?
Yeah.
Well, where to begin? It was great fun. No. Well, when I was still in the Cadet Org, I think I realized there was something not quite right with me, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. After having done the EPF, and then me being 16, maybe I was 17, I realized there's something very wrong with me, and that turned out to be that I'm gay, right? So as I was in the Sea Org, I realized I was gay. I was attracted to men. And as you know, when you grow up in Scientology, you just get taught that homosexuality is like one of the worst things, or any sort of sexual perversion, as they would say. And I knew that somebody who is homosexual is apparently 1.1. So hidden hostility. So pretending to be your friend, but actually is going to stab you in the back, and is an evil person just for existing. Hubbard says that anyone who is from the tone scale, so this is a scale that Hubbard invented, where he basically points out all the different tones of emotions, right? The higher you are, the better you are, and so on and so forth. It goes from plus 40 to minus 40, with 0.00 being body death. So you can be even below body death. And he says anything that is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but anything that is below 2.0 is to be avoided, and is actively evil, or is actively trying to destroy humanity in some form, in some way, right? And homosexuality would be 1.1. So I'm actively destroying humanity just for being who I am, right? So this was happening with me. And during this time, I was, so when I first finished the EPF, I was put as the canteen's IC. And which was,
and so for the people, the canteen is like a little shop where Sea Org members can buy, food and supplies.
Yeah, little food, snacks, little meals as well outside the meal times, because there were very strict meal times where you get your coffee, your tea, and so on and so forth. And when I was put on as the canteen IC, there were maybe 6 items there. There was like nothing. It was like completely, it was just nothing there. It was just a few, it was not even proper coffee. I think it was just instant coffee or something like that, and a water kettle to boil the water. And it was within one of the dining rooms. So the dining area at St. Hill is it's about 5 minutes walk from the castle itself. And it was an old stables. It was actually an old stables, and then that was turned into the galley, so the kitchen, and then you had the different dining rooms. And in one of those dining rooms, I was sitting there on a stool with a table with these 5-6 items or whatever. It was very awkward doing that. Anyway, I realized, okay, this is just, can I swear now? This is now a bit of a shit show. So I need to do something about that. So I already had a reputation about, my very moist Victorian sponge cake, very moist. So I decided to use my own pay to buy ingredients, go into the galley and make cake, and then bring them over to the canteen and then sell them. And I sold them obviously very quickly because people already knew that they were good. And so I made pure income then, because obviously there was no expenditure from the from my pool of income, because it was my own pay, right? So then on that I would build on that, and I would bake more and more, and then I could buy more ingredients, more items. I could get a proper coffee machine and so on and so forth. And I got it to the point where I had a whole room was renovated for me, and I had shelves full of stuff, and I was very proud of that. And during this time, we had the chief steward. His name was Christopher Simons. He was from Chicago, and he was actually put in the stables because he was on a mission, and then the mission failed, and everybody was sent to the RPF except for him. He ended up in the stables. I don't know why. I never asked him about that, because you just don't talk about these sort of things in Scientology and the Sea Org. And so he was not a cook. He just, he was just put there. And during this time, he just got married, and he put in a CSW, a completed staff work, to ask for some time off to have with his new wife. And I thought to myself, this is never going to be approved, because at this point, it was just me and him running the whole place. We have to do the canteen. We have to cook food for 350 staff, lunch and dinner. We have to clean all the dining rooms. There were 1, 2, 3, 4 dining rooms. We have to clean those. We have to do all of the washing up, all of the cooking utensils. We have to clean the kitchen, this every single day. And we had to get all the meals obviously on time, because it couldn't be late. That would have been a huge flap. Because again, as I said, walking down from the castle to the stables was 5 minutes. So 10 minutes of your break is already gone. So you only have 20 minutes. Then you need to queue. You want to get a coffee from the canteen. So maybe you have 10, 15 minutes to eat. So it could never be late. So us two, we were doing that. So during the time of the canteen, when I was doing the canteen, when there were no people at the canteen to buy stuff, I would run into the washing up. I would do the washing up. I would go into the kitchen, do some prep for the evening or for lunch for the next day, and then run back into the canteen. So I knew this was not going to be approved. Christopher is never going to have a day off. And it was approved. He was gone for 12 days.
And by the way, you're still a teenager. You're still a teenager
I'm a teenager. I'm 16, 17 years old. 16, 17 years old. And but to his credit, he organized that the EPF came every single day to clean the dining rooms and do about an hour or so of the washing up every day. And he organized somebody else from the estates division in CLO to come and do the canteen during lunch and dinner time, because I told them there's no way you can leave the canteen empty during lunch and dinner time, because people take stuff without paying for it. That was just a fact. I knew that. I saw that happening. I knew that they would throw in foreign money into a basket. I would, in the afternoon, I would put just a basket there for the people who would come in the afternoon outside of the lunch or dinner hours, and then would just throw some foreign money in there, or just, I would know the stock, because I had to keep track of all the stock. So I knew, well, technically speaking, I should have this much money, but there isn't that much money. So I knew stuff was taken. And the profit margin in the canteen is per LRH's policies, well, FOs, is 10%, which is nothing. It's only allowed to be 10%. So if you get a box of 10 things and one of those things is broken, that's all your profit gone. That's gone. So you'd have to sell each one of those. So if anything gets stolen or whatever. So I knew that. So I told them, I told Christopher he needed to organize somebody that, to his credit, he did that. And so for 12 days, I was put in the kitchen. And what happened was, I have to brag a little bit, but I raised the standard of the food so much that, the statistics just went way, like, it was just highest ever. Well, it wasn't highest ever yet, but it was like a huge affluence. And naturally, my seniors, they were very happy with that, because at that time, CLO was being part of the birthday game. And this statistic that we had at the stables for the galley was part of the birthday game. So if in the birthday game, you're supposed to get as much point as possible. If you have a small rise, you get, I believe, 1 point. If you have an affluence, 3 points. And then there's such a thing as a power trend, and then you get 5 points, right? So the more points, the better.
I think it's 6 points for power.
Is it 6 even? Wow, fancy that. And so I don't know how or why, but I was pretty good at cooking, and I had a very good sense of flavor. And I would buy with my pay cookbooks and to educate myself how to cook properly. And I would make very good, I have to say, very good Indian curries, and all sort of that. I mean, we did lots of great stuff, and I just raised the standard. I basically did the same things that he did, but I just did it better. And so it was way better. And then when he came back, Christopher, from his holiday with his wife, the supercargo decided, all right, Simon's going to stay in the kitchen. And then I got a deputy canteen IC to do the canteen. But I was all the time still the canteen IC. They never changed my post, which really annoyed me. But I was basically the cook, and I started to cook there. And then the statistic just went up and up and up and up. But I knew eventually it's going to tank again. Just to clarify quickly how the statistic is being counted, you have a sheet, and on the sheet of paper, you have a voting system where you vote for the food, for the service, and it goes from +7 to -7. So you basically write your name, you write Aaron, and then you write, yeah, breakfast was 3 and 5, and then lunch was 2 and 1, and dinner was 3 and 1, or whatever. And then that at the end of the day, and then at the end of the week, would be all counted together, and then that was the statistic, basically. Now, most people didn't write down the vote. Aaron, I'm gonna out you now. Did you always vote?
Usually, because it was so easy, and the staff on L. Ron Hubbard Way at PAC were so desperate for it. But can I tell you a funny anecdote about the voting? Because I'm dying to know if this happened in St. Hill.
Sure.
Because technically, the people who work in the galley serving the food are part of the Continental Management Sea Org unit.
Yeah.
And most of the people who are eating in the galley are part of the service organization. And technically, the people in the service organization are in a lower organization than the Continental Management Unit. Okay. Now, there's a term in the Sea Org called backflash. Now, backflash basically means talking back to your senior. Okay. Yeah. Now, in the voting system, there's a positive and a negative. It's +7 and -7. Okay.
That's right.
-7 is backflash from steward, meaning the people serving you food basically got sassy with you and rude. Now, here's the thing. Someone who's senior to you cannot backflash to you. That's not possible. Yeah, and yet we would put, but because the people serving us the food were senior to us, they were fucking dicks. They were dicks.
Oh, okay.
And because they were dicks, we would usually vote -7. But they wouldn't accept that vote because you can't backflash someone in a senior org. It was so messed up. How did it work in St. Hill?
It's interesting because, my thought process never went there. I never saw myself as senior. Because the thing is, CLO, the Continental Liaison Office, right, who is senior above, senior to AOSH and St. Hill Foundation, they made so shitty income. Like the money they made was so low, was so like nothing, that I just had lots of respect for AOSH, because AOSH, just to explain, AOSH, they basically deliver all the service, all the courses, all the auditing. So obviously they make a lot of income. And CLO's main income is a percentage of all the orgs of their continent, right? And in Scientology, continent is different than an actual continent. So for St. Hill, the continent would just be the United Kingdom, just England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and that's it. And the rest of Europe would belong to the Europe org in Denmark. So we would only get a small percentage, whatever it was, 10, 20%, I don't know, of their income, right, of their gross income, and whatever SMI would make, because they had their missions and so on and so forth. But it was so crappy, it was so failing, it was so pathetic. I mean, my pay was like £4, £5, maybe £10, £20. We were supposed to get £50, which I think is I always thought back then it was weird, because £50 is more worth than $50. And Hubbard said $50, but he said $50 in the 60s or 70s, which of course would have been much more than now. I did think about that, but I thought, I don't mind, $50 is more. But during the 4 years I was there, I saw those $50 very generally speaking, generously speaking, I would say 10 times, maybe probably less than 10 times. Did I see those 50 pounds, right? And usually I had weeks where I had no pay at all, nothing at all, because the income was so bad. So I had huge respect to LSH and St. Hill Foundation. So that process never happened. However, on the sheet, it does say, and this is Hubbard who wrote that if you do vote minus, you have to write on the back of the sheet the reason why. Why is it minus? You can't just write minus whatever and then just not say. So what we would do is, if it was correct or whatever, of course we judged whether it was correct or not. Then we would count it. If we decided it's not correct, then we wouldn't count it. I mean, that's how we did that with the minus. But I mean, Christopher, he was a piece of work. He was quite unpleasant, very arrogant, particularly because he knew the COCMO. This was a lady. Her name was Maya, but I don't remember her surname, funny enough, because he would always say, "Oh yeah, Maya is here." And I'd be like, "Who?" "Oh, the COCMO, right?" You know, like that. But he would never call her Maya in front of in her face, naturally. You know, he would always say Mr. whatever it was, you know. But it was that kind of person, like, I know him and I know that person and so on and so forth. Very, you know, I mean, we had
let me say real quick, because now I'm dying to know. Anyone in the live chat who knows Maya, who is the COCMO UK, and knows her last name and who this is, I'm now dying to know.
She was quite young.
Okay, so, okay, so I'm going to keep a little bit of an eye on the
sure.
On the live chat. Okay, so was his connection to the COCMO, did that somehow factor into whether he would accept a negative vote or something?
No. But I would say, like, to describe his character a little bit. So he was a little bit. He did look down at AOSH and St. Hill Foundation. You know, he did look down on the EPF and so on and so forth. I didn't really, just because I'm not saying because I was such a good person. No, but because I knew I was homosexual. So how can I judge anyone else? I was filth. I was dirt. I was worthless. I was garbage. I was nothing. And so I never saw myself above anybody, not even above the RPF. I was worthless. And, you know, you have an extreme pressure in the kitchen, having to cook the food correctly, enough, you know, that everybody had enough, on time. You have to do this every single day. And it is such pressure. It is unbelievable. And on top of that, I had to make sure I didn't fuck up because I'm gay. What I mean by that is, I genuinely thought that I was so much into hidden hostility. I was so covert hostility. I mean, I was so covert that I didn't even know it myself. Like, that something inside me, this aberration, is going to take hold of me, and somehow it's going to poison everybody. It's going to burn the food. It's going to do something to ruin everybody's day. So I had to constantly watch what I'm doing, sort of almost double check everything that I'm doing to make sure I don't make a mistake. So that was quite something. That time, you know, during that time, you know, having to, you know, just anyway, it's difficult to describe, but anyway. And so that's why I never looked down at anybody, because I was the lowest of scum. So that's why that would never have occurred to me to do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so sad.
Yeah.
Did any Sea Org ethics officers or any of your seniors ever address that with you, or was it just something you were struggling with?
No, it was just something I struggled with. Nobody knew about this. It was just completely within me. And I would always laugh. I was always smile. I was always, you know, I was always trying I was always, what's the word? I was always trying to punish myself for being homosexual. Always trying to be nicer than I had to be. Like, for example, when there was birthdays of people, I would use my pay to buy ingredients and then bake them a cake outside of work hours. So I was not allowed to bake the cake in the afternoon for someone's birthday. I had to do that in the evening when I was supposed to go home or whatever, and I would take a bus later or whatever. or during my lunchtime or dinner time, I wouldn't eat, and I would just prep the cake or whatever, and I would give them a cake for their birthday. Or for example, in the Sea Org, every 2 weeks, in theory, you're allowed to take a day off. I say in theory because you need to find somebody to replace you. So you already work 14, 16 hours a day. So you need to find somebody else who works the same hours, but takes over your job. Sometimes that works quite well because you're in the same office. So it kind of works out, but it's a bit more difficult in the kitchen. However, Christopher did manage to get a day off every once in a while. And then he would always say, he would push me and say, come on, Samuel, take a day off. I'm going to organize the EPF. We can do something. You can take a day off. And I would always say, no, I have to work. I would work more than I really had to, than was expected of me, to just sort of punish myself for being gay, basically, to sort of, it's just this whole Scientology attitude of just punishing yourself for thoughts, for whatever. Like, I never did anything homosexual, anything like that. In the most homosexual thing I did during my time in the Sea Org was saying, oh, look at those flowers, they look rather lovely, don't they? But apart from that, nothing. And so I mean, that is
gay.
So gay. Oh my God, so gay. No, but it was, yeah. I mean, that is, nobody knew about this. Eventually, it was found out because I then wanted to leave the Sea Org, right? And so I communicated that as well, but nobody found out about that. So just to very briefly go back, when I was telling you about, I was put then in the kitchen. I was in the canteen, I see, and then I was put into the kitchen, and then I improved the food, obviously, and then it went up. And I thought to myself, I don't know if it was solely my idea or I talked about it with Christopher. In any case, I came up with the idea, let's bribe everybody to get more points. So I started to make cookies. I made large cookies. I always made 2 types. I made a healthier one, a not so healthy one, because obviously we had different age ranges, and an elderly person doesn't necessarily want a triple chocolate chip cookie or something. And what I would do on Wednesday evening, because for whatever reason, the week ends on Thursday, 2:00. So for Wednesday dinner, we had at the galley, there was like a slot where it was like open. There was not the door. It was open. You could look into the kitchen. I would hang up a large sign saying, show us your voting sheet that you voted and you'll get a free cookie. So I started doing that every week. So that was an extra work that I did. For somewhere I needed to find the hours to bake hundreds of cookies, right? And outside of everything else that we had to do. And I had to do this every single week. And when I did this, the statistic went completely through the roof. I mean, I don't remember the numbers, but it was more than double than before, like the number, the statistic, because now everybody voted. Even if they only voted 1 or 2, it didn't matter. The fact that now everybody was encouraged to vote, right? So Jeff from BTS for Life, he said, well, it's like the carrot and the stick, but you actually give them the carrot, right? And
the cookie and the stick.
The cookie and the stick, right? And we actually ended up being in a power trend. And we maintained the power trend for a long time doing that. I mean, it went down at one point, and then we brought it up again, and then managed to get this power trend again. So we gave lots of points to CLO for the birthday game. As I understand now, CLO is not part of the birthday game anymore, but back then it was. And just to talk about a little bit my career, if you want to call that, in the kitchen. And so when I was about 16, 17, I realized I was gay. I was quite sure with 17. I was like, yeah, I'm definitely, that one. And then I struggled with that for years and years and years, and just to suppress it, don't talk to anybody about it, because you can't trust anybody. You cannot trust. You don't have friendships within Scientology, within the Sea Org, because again, these are going back to the reports. If you see something that is happening that isn't right or whatever, you have to report it, because if later on this were to come up and HCO would find out you were in the room, you were there when this was happening, Samuel was telling you about this and you didn't report it, you get in trouble too. So naturally, you have to report everybody at all times. So I never talked to anybody about it. Plus, as well, it's just the shame of it. I mean, I thought I was filth and disgusting. How would they think of me? It would be even worse. And so I just suffered very much in silence, always smiling, always laughing, always being very helpful, going out of my way, doing things, as I said, to sort of punish myself and make up for the damage of being homosexual. And at one point, I just couldn't do it anymore. I just knew that, and I decided to delete myself, as you say on YouTube. I decided to delete myself. This is the only solution. And my thinking was not because my life is so horrible, but because to protect Scientology, because I didn't want to create a PR flap. Because obviously, I mean, I'm going through puberty and there's certain urges, you know what I mean? And I didn't want to do anything or whatever. And apart from that, I didn't want to bring shame on the organization. And because I had no idea. I grew up in Scientology. I was in this bubble. All of my friends as a child, I mean, 90% of my friends were other Scientologists. So I was only in this bubble. I had no idea how for me, the world was the same outside of Scientology as in Scientology, that everybody would think I'm filth and I'm disgusting and I'm worthless. And so I didn't even think about, okay, if I leave the Sea Org, maybe I have a chance or something. No, to me, it would have been the same, basically. And so I wanted to do that. I wanted to delete myself. And I thought about doing it within the time when I was in the Sea Org. But I didn't do it because obviously this would have been a PR flap. If you're if you're employed by Scientology and you delete yourself, the newspaper, they're obviously going to say, well, that's the reason why, because he was working for Scientology, right? So I thought to myself, very clever, I'll root out and then wait maybe a month and then delete myself, because then the connection isn't quite so strong there, right? And I thought, very smart. And well, then I had to communicate that. I had to say that I wanted to leave the Sea Org. And so I went one morning after the muster in the morning, I would just go to CLO, to HCO CLO. I would go to the receptionist and say, okay, I need a routing out form for the Sea Org. And I think she was just so stunned. She just gave it to me without a word. She didn't say anything. She just gave it to me and I just walked off and I started to do the checklist. It says, you need to go to Treasury, you need to go there and so on and so forth. And very quickly, my seniors in the supercargo, he found out about it. And he talked to me and trying to find out. And I just basically told him I want to delete myself and I want to protect the church. And that's why I need to root out of the Sea Org to make sure I don't damage the church. And, on one hand, I knew this was the ideal solution. But on the other hand, I did think and hoped that he or, HCO or whoever would say, no, Samuel, don't do this. You're very valuable. We appreciate what you've done. Look at all the Sea Org members. They're so happy now with the food. They generally like to go and eat. You're important to the group or something. No, they basically told me that's a good idea, to do that to protect the church. And that was something I had a small hope that maybe they would help me or anything like that. And I didn't think at the time they didn't help me because they knew they couldn't, but more because I was just not worth saving. I was not worth the effort of even trying, I was convinced auditing would have helped me to audit the gay away. But I just thought I was just so worthless that they didn't even see any point in even trying. And that was very defeating for me. And so I was put on the routing out form, but I still had to work at the stables in the galley. Usually when you are on the routing out form, you get removed from the post and then you are doing manual labor. But we were just so short staffed. I had to stay there. So I just kept going. And it just went on a little bit too long because I was probably too cooperative. I didn't, because it wasn't like there were not things happening, bad things happening on my post. It wasn't like I was making lots of mistakes or people were angry with me. And then eventually I left. So it was sort of almost expected. It just sort of came out of the blue that I said, because I was always smiling, I was always happy, everything was fine. And I was during that time as well, I was the same. I didn't show any grief at all, nothing. And so I think that's why they took their sweet ass time to root me out. Eventually I couldn't handle it anymore. And then one time at Walsh Manor, which was the birthing, I was lying in bed. Usually I would fall into bed unconscious. I was just so tired. But one evening I just couldn't fall asleep because I was just thinking, I need to do this now. I have to do this now. I have to do this now. So I got up, went to the galley at Walsh, took a knife, and I just walked off the property. There were cameras, but I don't know, nobody noticed. Anyway, I just walked off the property and I just walked for hours, just in a random direction to get away from there as far as possible, and then to do it with the knife, right? And I remember getting to a bus stop. I don't know, this was probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't remember. And just sitting there and really just sort of willing myself to do it and justifying why it is okay to do this while I am still a Sea Org member. Saying it's okay, you can do this now. It's not going to be such a PR flap. You were not an important person. You're not an executive. You are, you work in the galley. I mean, that's where you send all the bad people, the people who have failed missions and so on and so forth, who have done things wrong. So, you were not important. So it's not going to be so bad if you do this. And, anyway, I couldn't do it because I just thought, no, the possibility that there could be such a PR flap. And so then I went back. The next day I told this to the supercargo that this happened. And then I was completely removed from the stables and I was doing mess work. And then it was quite quickly, the process. It took a few weeks. And then I left again, my flight was on the 17th of December, 2012. I came back to Switzerland. My stepfather had already left the Sea Org, so I went to his place. And yeah, I'm sorry to say that I did actually try to delete myself twice shortly after. I think the first time was in February of 2013, and then in March again, and then and then I did another attempt many years later, actually. So yeah, that was my time in the Sea Org, pretty much.
Unbelievable. How did your stepfather and anyone else in Scientology deal with that in February and March and later on?
The first attempt in January, my father... No, hang on, that's not true. What happened was, on the first attempt, I don't want to be too graphic, but basically I was trying to poison myself. And I went into a park, where sometimes you have homeless people lie sleeping on a bench. So I thought, perfect, nobody will notice, at that body there. So I did that, and then my body immediately, reacted. And then I went home, and I basically, I was very pale and all of that. And my father asked me what happened, and then he insisted, and eventually I told him. And he basically said something along the lines of, "Oh, don't be silly," or like, "Why are you doing that?" Like that sort of way. I think he was concerned generally, but I think he just didn't know how to deal with that. So that was his response. My second attempt, I didn't tell him about that. And then my last attempt, which was actually in 2019. So this was actually after I've already left Scientology mentally, and I had said, I'm not a Scientologist anymore. 2 years after that, that was my last attempt, and that was the most severe, where I actually ended up in the hospital and everything. And obviously my father, he knew because he was contacted. And then he said the same thing, like, why would you do that? It's such a silly thing. But we never talked about it. We never had a sit down and let's talk about what happened. Why do I feel that way? Why is this still persisting? Talk about my childhood, what I've seen, what was done during my time in the Sea Org, how I felt. Never had that. I never had that. Again, I've never had a serious conversation like that. And other people of my family, my stepmother, she actually doesn't know any of that. I've never told her. She's quite, like you, she doesn't mind, and she shows her emotions, and I didn't want her to have to go through that. And my brother, he knows. My sister, I'm sure she doesn't know. I'm sure I never told her. My brother, he knows, but I'm not sure if I told him first, or my father told him first. You know what I mean? But he knows about that, and he never said anything about that really. except that he did say that he was very sorry that I felt that way, and that I felt like that was the only way to handle my situation. He definitely genuinely felt like, and he actually said that he felt responsible as the older brother, that that he wasn't there to help me to during my time in the Sea Org, and because he was obviously in a different country, and then back in 2019 when he had already then left the Sea Org, like he genuinely feels very sorry and about all of that. And my mother, goodness, her reaction, I don't know if she knows about the attempts, but when I was at St. Hill and I was going through the routing out process, my mother, she was obviously in the HHC, as I mentioned, and that's where lots of PC folders lie about. And I'm assuming that because of my whole situation, my PC folder was taken out of the basement and was lying somewhere. She saw it. This is all speculation. She saw it and she thought, oh, what's he doing? And then looked inside and she found out this way. She told me she read in the PC folder. And then she came one day during lunchtime. She came into the kitchen. She never usually would come in the kitchen. Sometimes if I were outside of the kitchen at the line where people would get the food, I would see her and then we would wink, and that was basically our communication for the day. But she came into the kitchen and she said, "Sam, I need to talk to you about something." And then she took me away. We went a little bit outside of the stables, but on the road. I mean, people were walking past us, and she just shouted at me. Mind you, she's clear and supervisor and all of that, best TRs. She was shouting at me and basically telling me, "How dare you to want to do this? I've spent so much money on you." And something I didn't mention actually. When I was 10, I went to regular school until I was 10 years old, and then from 10 to 13 years old, I went to two different Scientology schools in Switzerland. And the other schools, they were like a school from the state, so you don't have to pay money for it. But the Scientology school, they were private schools, and they were quite expensive. And my mother had to put me there because I was very rebellious as a child. And when I was 10 years old, I was doing some very rebellious things in the school. And they basically wanted to send me to get analyzed by a psychiatrist. And that's why my mother pulled me out, and then she put me in the Scientology schools. And she was basically shouting at me all the money and time she's invested in me, and I'm wasting it all. And she should be the one deleting herself because of me, because of all the heartache that I've given her over the years. So she's shouting at me while everything was going on. It was during the day, during lunchtime, and people were walking past. I mean, now I can sort of say jokingly "OutTRs," but back then, I mean, that was such a very shocking moment. Yeah, so that was her attitude when she found out. I don't know if she actually knows that I did try to delete myself. I don't know if she knows this. Yeah, and other family, I don't have any contact really. I don't have any contact with my other families, so they wouldn't know.
Jesus. There's been a lot of conversations about Scientology deadening emotions through things like bull bait and stuff like that. Yeah. But until you hear stories like this, with parents just having no compassion or care or love or empathy or anything for their own children, I don't know that it's easy to appreciate the degree to which that occurs and the effects that has in people and families. Like,
yeah,
it'd be hard for anyone to believe.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you feel the same way. I mean, we lived that experience. For us, this is just normal. This is just, normal. I can recognize now, of course, it is not normal, but it's not for me such a big deal in that sense because I experienced it, right? And I take a positive view. I say to myself, well, I am who I am now because of my experiences. Who knows where I would be or how I would be, my character, if I haven't had all of those experiences, right? And having opened up to friends of mine, after I started to watch your videos and things like that, and sort of realized, okay, I'm not the cuckoo one, Scientology is, I decided to talk to my friends who didn't know anything about my past. I mean, I would lie to them all the time. I would say that to them, like, what did you do in England, so on and so forth. I would say, I was working in the kitchen and so on and so forth, but never any details. What does your mother do as work? I would say, well, she's a teacher for philosophy and religion at an academy in England, which is sort of true, right? But I would never say any of that sort of thing. I would never tell them anything, so they didn't really know. And then there were some very close friends where I decided, okay, I'm going to open up and tell them a little bit. I never told them my whole story chronologically, but maybe we would talk about religion, we would talk about our mother or whatever it is, and then I would just mention a little story, and they would just look at me in horror and tell me, this is not normal, this is not how people should behave or how parents should behave. And their reactions made me realize that it wasn't just not quite right, it was generally at times evil, like the way I was treated, and my experience and so on and so forth. And that eventually then that also helped me to sort of wake up from the whole Scientology brain farts and all of that. And yeah, I mean, it is shocking. I still have, talking about suppressing your emotions, I still have struggles expressing my emotions, sadness, grief, or great happiness. I can't show happiness. I mean, the last time I genuinely laughed, like really laughed, was in 2018 or 19. Was the last time I really laughed, where like my belly ached basically. And that was the last time I really genuinely laughed. And since then I haven't really. And before that, it was also some years. I mean, I do laugh, I chuckle and so on and so forth, but it's almost part of it is like an instinctive thing. Like when you laugh, it just happens. But some percentage of it is keep it up a bit more longer, like almost like acting it to seem normal. Everybody else is laughing at the joke or at whatever had just happened, in the instant. So you sort of, you might smile. Maybe I would just smile at the incident rather than laugh, but then I would just sort of force a chuckle. And things like crying, I have difficulty doing that in front of other people, particularly. There are certain movies where I watch and I cry, and others I would ask, did you cry? And they would say, what are you talking about? I never cried in that movie. There are certain emotional things that happen that really do grip me, but I have it still affects me that way, that these emotions, they're very difficult. Or when I get a present for my birthday or something, and it's something I actually wanted, not something useless, I can't show like genuine joy. It's so difficult. It's like I do show joy, and I do hope that people realize that but it's very difficult to like if I see other people, I just get jealous how they can express their joy and their happiness. And I still struggle with that a little bit.
As far as the laughing part goes, have you tried weed?
Darling, I tried it twice and it didn't really do anything for me. I mean, probably I didn't do it properly, you know what I mean? I
try the edibles. If you're not a smoker, and I'm not a smoker, smoking anything kills me. Try edibles. I mean, every time I take some edibles, I end up, especially if I'm in a group of friends, I end up laughing so hard I can't fucking stand up. And it's the funnest thing. The funnest thing for me in life is laughing that hard that you just you think you might need to go to the hospital. You're laughing so hard.
Yeah. No, I need to try that out. I don't know how the laws are in Switzerland, in regards to weeds and all of that. But maybe I should try that out and just, that'd be fun.
Just a recommendation. But I wanted to say, and additionally, you were talking earlier about the tone scale And in Scientology, being gay is at 1.1 on the tone scale. And Hubbard says that anything below 2.0 is tending towards succumb or death. And anything above 2.0 is trending towards survival. And so it really is. This is tying this to Scientology and deadening emotions, or conditioning people not to show emotions. Sympathy is below 2.0 on the tone scale. Sympathy on Scientology tone scale is close to body death. Showing sympathy is pity's not on the tone. Is pity on the tone scale? Shit.
I'm pretty sure, because I remember seeing the movie of the tone scale, and the guy who did pity, I remember he had this great large mustache. I mean, it was enormous. I mean, wow. I remember that's the only one I remember, pity, from that, because of that fabulous mustache that he had. But that's why I'm quite sure pity is on the tone scale. Yeah.
But like, no matter what, that Scientology says that showing sympathy to someone, and also what it says in Dianetics about sympathy engrams are like the worst kind of engrams. That you're trained that it's literally destructive to show sympathy. Now, a Scientologist might go, yes, but sympathy means something very specific there. Shut up. There's no empathy isn't on the tone scale. It's not a tone. There's no tone above 2.0 that is basically consoling someone or making someone feel that it's okay that they feel hurt, or that they feel sorrow, or that they feel grief, and that it's okay to experience that. Scientology trains you that it's not okay, and that those emotions are dictated by your reactive mind and your engrams, and those are things to be shunned and erased. And if they're not erased, you still have to pretend like you don't have them, and all of these things. And I think this is one of the things that causes Scientologists the most grief, the most mental health issues, in my personal anecdotal opinion, after Scientology, is dealing with this battle of emotions and what's okay to feel and what's okay to experience. And I mean, and it's so destructive to children.
Yeah.
You know? It kills me that you experienced all that. And I'm just so sorry that you had to experience all that. And I was going to ask you a question that you might have already started to answer, which is, what is it that has allowed you to feel good about yourself, and to feel happy, or experience happiness, or want to embrace life and do new things and look forward to the future? I guess I don't want to assume that that's how you feel, but you do come across as someone who feels that way. And so I'm just asking you, what helped you?
Well, I wouldn't say that I don't have. I mean, I was never clinically. Nobody has ever told me I have depression. I'm pretty sure I definitely had that. I wouldn't say I don't have that anymore. I still have it. It bubbles under the surface, but it bubbles much lower under the surface. And there were a few things I actually did that generally helped me, that I thought at the time were silly, but they actually helped me. One of them was gratefulness, being grateful for what I have. Acknowledge what has happened, sure, but where am I now in my life right now? What do I have? And recognize that and be grateful for it. And I actually talked to somebody about depression and all of that, and then he told me that what he did is he took a book and he wrote down, like physically wrote down, all the things he's grateful about. And the first time he did it, he wrote like 30 things, and then every day he would write 2 or 3 things, just write something new down. And on a day he wouldn't know what to write, he would just read the list again, and every time it would get longer. And I thought, that seems a bit silly. I don't know if that's going to help, but I thought, why not? Let's just try it out. And I did that, and that genuinely helped me, because it generally put everything into perspective, that there is no reason, quote unquote, to be depressed now. You are free from the clutches of Scientology. You're free to do what you want. I can do whatever I want now, which is something I never had during the time when I was a Scientologist. Even after I left the Sea Org, I was still going to the local Scientology org in Basel. So I still went there. I was still being controlled in that way, right? And I wasn't able to just do whatever I want to do. And now I can do whatever I want to do. I paint, I crochet sometimes. I work in the gardens. I still work as a chef, by the way. I did my apprenticeship and I went to culinary school here in Switzerland between 2015 and 2018, which is when I graduated. And so I'm a chef. I cook, I bake, and that to just physically write it down. And then you see this huge list of things. I mean, I would write very, very simple things like I've got 2 arms, I've got 10 fingers, I've got all my fingernails, things like that seem very obvious and you don't think about it. But there are people who don't have that, and they somehow manage. And it's not about comparing like, oh, somebody else has it so much worse than me. That is actually a very bad thing to do because, well, trauma is trauma, and if I get a paper cut as a chef, you have extreme resistance to burns, to cuts. I mean, we say if the finger is still attached, you can keep working. Just put a bit of paper on it, shove a glove on there, and just keep working until the end of your shift, which ends in 12 hours, right? And another person gets a paper cut and they need to have a lie down. Now, that's maybe an extreme example, but for them, that is very traumatic because they didn't experience many more traumatic things. But I went through so much shit that when these sort of things happen, it's just nothing to me. And so that's why you should never, in my opinion, unprofessional opinion, I need to say, you should not compare trauma because trauma is trauma and people have different experiences and so on and so forth. So I'm not trying to say, I'll have it so much better than everybody else or anything like that, but just to recognize, look what I do have, look how well I'm doing. There are people out there who actually care about me. I can just go to a shop and buy whatever I want because I've got the money for it. I can allow myself to buy something that's completely useless, like some toy or whatever. Like I don't have to buy something with the thought of this is going to increase my productivity or anything like that. Or I can just, or the fact that I have 2 days off a week. I mean, that is crazy to me, considering. And that now I make, good enough money to survive on my own and all of that. I don't need any support, financial support from anybody. I can buy clothes, whatever I want, and so on and so forth. I mean, the list is huge. And just going over that is something that really helped me. And then another thing that I did, now this might be very pessimistic, I'm not sure, but it helped me, which is stop trying to be happy. That's what I said to myself. Now, this sounds very negative, but what I mean by that is my goal was happiness, be happy, be happy. But it was so far away because I was so depressed all the time that it was never reachable. I never reached that. So, and even the moments where I did almost reach it, I didn't recognize those moments because I didn't actually reach it, And so what I decided to do, don't try to be happy, just try to be content. Be happy with the lot that you have and sort of put down the level of, what you're trying to achieve. And that helped me a lot because when things happened that actually genuinely made me happy, even if I couldn't tell my face to show it, I actually felt the happiness. I felt it inside, the happiness. And then when I had a low point in my life, it wasn't quite so low because the fall wasn't that severe because I was on this middle ground between happiness and depression, sadness, or whatever. And that is something that helped me. And I think eventually I can get to a point where I can then reach much more for happiness rather than just being content. But that is something that certainly has helped me so that when I do get my depressive phases, they're not as severe. I can get myself to go out and take a walk, be in nature, and that's that sort of thing that helps me as well. And so these are the things I have done to help me to have and I'm just generally speaking, I'm quite positive, like I'm a glass half full sort of guy, generally speaking. And I guess
it seems like we're kind of similar in that regard where it doesn't really matter what's going on. There's a general approach of positivity. And I don't know if some people would call that denial or if some people would call that resilience or or
Yeah.
whatever. But I do sort of sense it in you a little bit that you'd
Mm.
be more inclined to just lean into the positivity in any way that you can.
Mm.
By the way, do you work professionally as a chef these days? Because for
I
those
do.
of you just joining us, Samuel's YouTube channel is the SP Chef. Is that what you do?
Yeah, I am actually a chef, and I've worked all over the place. I've had amazing experiences, and great privileges working in famous restaurants and so on and so forth. And I actually, on my channel, I started doing a suppressive cooking series where I take recipes during my time in the Sea Org, where and I redo them, and I film it, and I talk about, for example, the cookies that I use, the persuasion cookies, as I call them. Well, I filmed that. I filmed me making the cookies, and I talk about it, my experience, and what happened. So that's a series I just started, and yeah.
I'll tell you what, Jenna Miscavige is going to be starting a new series on YouTube of live baking cookies live with
Ah,
someone else who's also baking cookies live and doing a
awesome.
chat while baking.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
it sounds like your triple chocolate SP cookies would be perfect for.
It sounds like it. Yeah, absolutely.
Do we have a little bit more time to chat here? I
Yeah,
know
of
it's
course.
getting a little late for you. I want to talk a little bit about. You mentioned at one point you started actually watching Scientology videos online. How did that
Yeah.
happen? How did that come to be?
It's difficult to pinpoint. I already had a YouTube account. I think I made it like 2013, 2014 already. I already had that. So I would still watch YouTube videos. And I think it just one of your videos or somebody else's video about something about Scientology just popped up, and I saw it, and there was something in the title. Or maybe there was nothing in the title as such that said Scientology. I don't know what it. Well, your channel was. Your channel was always called "Growing Up in Scientology," wasn't it? Yeah. So probably it was the name of that made me want to click on that, and yeah. So I can't tell you what was the first film of yours that I watched. You started your channel in 2015, 16, 17, somewhere around that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to pull it up to see exactly when it was. Let's see. Go to your channel. Go to about created. Oh yeah, 2015, June 2015.
Okay. Interesting. So interesting. Yeah. So I probably just started to watch pretty much when you started, and I'm one of your earliest subscribers. Obviously, anonymously at the time. I didn't have any name or anything like that. I never posted any comments or anything like that, naturally. But that just sort of started. And then me watching the interviews, as I said earlier in the beginning of our talk, just seeing other people recount their experience, me seeing, oh my God, I went through exactly the same thing. And even if they talk about something that I did not experience at all, I knew if I would have been in the same position, if I would have been in their place, that would have happened. That reaction, the way the ethics officer handled the situation, the supervisor, whatever, it would have happened that way, and I knew that. And that slowly sort of clicked that the mistakes or the mistreatment that I felt that I had or whatever, it was not unique to me. It is part of Scientology, because you have to apply Scientology precisely as Hubbard said it. So naturally, if something happens at St. Hill, you would assume it happens everywhere and on every base, in that sort of way. But I didn't want to believe that. But then watching these interviews, it made me realize that that was actually the case.
Yeah. You mentioned having watched Joey Chait's interview.
Yeah.
Was that particularly does that stand out to you because a major part of Joey's story is like secret growing up in Scientology, kind of having this secret that he was gay?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Is it amazing to you that he not only was a successful Sea Org member and an auditor, but did his OT levels?
Yeah. He went up to OT5, I believe, as I recall. It's years ago, but when I watched the interview. But yeah, he went up OT. And I think he was also wasn't he one of the people approving the pieces to become OT and doing the OT levels? Like he was working there in that area, wasn't he?
I can't remember. In order to do that, you have to be a class 9 auditor or a case supervisor,
Okay.
and I don't think Joey was that. But
Okay, yeah.
and he might have only gotten to OT3. I just can't remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the things that's look, everyone knows one of my big things is trying to get as many former Scientologists to get on YouTube as possible, and one of the reasons for that is so that people who are in Scientology will see so many different faces, so many different stories, eventually find someone that they know, someone that they liked, and see people talking about Scientology, fairly and accurately. And I don't think there's a single former Scientologist who I can think of who does these interviews that if a Scientologist were to listen to those interviews where they'd be like, oh no, that's not true. And so I'm saying that as a preface to your question. All the people that you saw on YouTube over the years, how did their stories hit you? Were you struck by the fact that everyone just seems to just be being honest, or have you felt that there's a sort of exaggeration, sort of hyperbolic component? As someone who was watching these videos while you were still in, was there any of the way this was all being discussed that you found offensive or turned you off in any way?
That's a very interesting question. I never thought about that. I'm sure there were things that I heard and I thought, no, that's not true. Where I immediately would go like this, oh, that's not true. That never happened. Like if you would interview like an OT and then he would talk about OT3 or whatever, or maybe somebody who's more executive, an executive or something like that, and then they would tell their story, things that I wouldn't, that I wouldn't have actually witnessed, that sort of thing. I probably would have said, no, that's exaggerated. But there were enough bits that they talked about that I could relate to, that happened. Completely the same thing happened to me, or as I said, things happened where I could see myself in that situation, and that's how it would have transpired, right? And there was enough of that for me to realize that, that telling the truth, this happened because this happened to me too. But there was, I mean, obviously, you were not the only channel doing stuff about Scientology and so on and so forth. There were a few other channels. I don't remember all of their names, but there were some that really put me off when I started doing it, because it was so in your face. Because I was still I was full on Scientologist, but obviously there was some inner struggle because again I'm gay, so obviously I'm evil, but at the same time I had a power trend. So how does that work? How is that possible? So I knew there was some inner conflict. So I thought to myself, I can't be that bad if I managed to get the statistics so up. If I got to a point where I was, I was rather well liked naturally, because people, if you give staff good food and you give them enough sleep, they're happy. That's pretty much all they need. If you take one or even worse, two of them away, it's just because that's the only thing they can look forward to, going to bed to sleep, or having a warm meal that it's actually nice, right? So I was under the impression I left a very good impression with people. At the same time, I'm evil, right? So that was this sort of conflict. So that's where the doubt and the unsure mindset was on whether Scientology is all that great. But there were some videos that sort of scared me off, and then I was sort of from the internet for a year or two, and then I went back in, and because what happened, just to mention briefly, when I left the Sea Org, I was still a good little Scientologist. I went to my local Scientology org in 2013 and 2014, but then I had to go to the military. In Switzerland, military is obligatory for all males. You have to go, right? So I got a letter saying you have to go, right? So I went. I ended up being there for 10 months. And during that time, I didn't have time to go to Scientology org. So the brainwashing stopped. And before that, I went all the time, right? I was always surrounded by Scientologists, except for work. And on work, I just worked and I didn't talk to anybody, because when I was in the Sea Org, I never talked to anybody. I never chit-chat at all with anybody doing work. It's just production. If you can stand around and chit chat, then you're not working, right? So I didn't have a social circle that way. I only had my social circle in Scientology. So then I was forced out of it because of military. So I was in military for 10 months, and I was done in April 2015.
Wow.
And during this time, I decided to do the apprenticeship and go of becoming a chef and doing the culinary school. And I started that on the 1st of August 2015. So there was only a period of 3 months, 3-4 months, where I could have done a little bit of Scientology, but I think I didn't do much. I think maybe I did an extension course or something like that. And then I went to culinary school and did my apprenticeship. And when you're an apprentice, you don't earn enough money to do Scientology. I mean, my pay was the equivalent of how much my small flat costed. I mean, my pay was literally just going into that. In the end, it took a year and a half, and then I got some money from the government, and they helped me out because I have to prove that I don't make enough money, that my parents don't make enough money, that they can't support me. Lots of paperwork back and forth. Eventually, they managed to help me. But I actually ended up for the first 1.5 years to work 160%. So 100%, at where I was doing my apprenticeship, then going to culinary school. And then in the evenings or on the weekends or on the days off that I had, I would go to another restaurant and work there to be able to make enough money to have money for everything else in life other than just a flat, right? So I didn't have the money and I didn't have the time. So in the end, I ended up being for 4 years not in Scientology, not having any contact, and working with non-Scientologists and realizing, look at all of these successful people, and they've never even read Dynetics. Because in Scientology, you get told the only reason why you're successful is because of Scientology. And if somebody outside of Scientology is successful, well, that's because they maybe accidentally use the technology, right? They're not aware of it, maybe they heard it somewhere or whatever. And that is the only reason why they're successful. And here I am in the military with all these guys, and then when I was in culinary school and doing my apprenticeship, meeting all of these people who have successful parents or my teachers and all of that, and I realized, okay, maybe Scientology does help, right, at the time, but there are other things too that help, clearly. I mean, you can't say, and then I sort of realized, well, duh, I mean, for example, the technology of dictionary. I mean, the first dictionary was invented in the 18th century, like 1750s or whatever it was, I mean, Hubbard didn't invent the dictionary, or, people were successful before 1950. It wasn't like, oh, wow, the idea of a business only started in 1950 or whatever it was. And I never even thought about that back then. But I then allowed myself to think about that. And so in 2015, this was when I was already having done my 10 months in the military and then having started culinary school. That's when I then started to find your channel and watch it, because I was separated from Scientology for some time, and that really helped me. Yeah.
Wow. When you first heard about the Xenu and the body thetans, how did you respond to that?
I think I ignored it. I ignored it for a long time. Like I don't know. I can't even tell you the moment where I sort of realized what that means, the implication of that. Like, what does that actually mean? I think for a very long time I just said it doesn't make sense because I don't understand it. Like, okay, I didn't die now of cancer, of leukemia, because I heard this technology, which made me doubt whether it's actually true, the technology. But some years later, I heard the actual Hubbard's voice talking about it, because there's a lecture or whatever it is where he talks about the Xenu story, and you can actually hear his voice, and you can hear this, of the old tape rolling, like it's not a new recording, and that sort of made me realize, okay, it definitely is true, but what does it mean? I pretty much ignored it for a while because I just didn't understand it really, and then I think after I heard that tape, I thought, okay, let me look at it exactly. What does that mean, really? And then I was just a little bit like, in a way, I wasn't surprised, because I knew as a child that when you die, there's a light. And when you go to this light, you get sucked into a station that is behind the moon. There, all your memory gets wiped, and then you get shot down back on Earth. So that is something I knew as a child. My mother told me about that. Because I asked her, like, why is it that if I lived all of this life, I don't remember any of that. And then she showed me either the policy, or maybe she said it like that, without having shown me the policy. And so then making the jump from this to the whole Xenu thing, it wasn't a great leap. Let's put it that way. It was like, oh, okay, weird, but I can see the connection. I can see, okay, sure, I can see that. So I don't think I was shocked. I wasn't clutching my pearls. You know what I mean? I was, I was holding my tiara maybe, but other than that, yeah.
Was there any disappointment though that how could that be what these magical OT levels have been about the entire time? Was there any of that?
No, not really, because to me that's like our creation story. Like how did we come to be? How do we have all of these engrams and all of that? That didn't really make me sort of angry about it. What made me angry is the clear cognition. Right?
Ah, yes.
So all your life you're told all these aberrations, all these engrams, they affect you and so on, and then you find out actually they don't really exist. You just made it up. That was something that really annoyed me. And then on OT8, oh, by the way, all the body thetans, just made it up. Never mind, And,
or all your whole track memories were the memories of your body thetans,
right.
or most of them.
Yeah. The all of those memories that you made up, funny story, I actually went only once in past life, and for whatever reason, this was doing TRs. I was doing OT tier 0, and I was just nodding off. I don't know. I was a very good student of like going like this and sleeping, and the supervisor wouldn't notice. I was pretty good. I was pretty good at that. So I could imagine I was doing the OT tier 0, which you sit down with your eyes closed, and apparently my left leg was twitching a lot. I didn't feel anything, but the supervisor said it was twitching, flank start. And eventually he was asking like, what's going on? What are you thinking about? And I just told him, I don't know, I'm just thinking of this weird memory. And I was telling him me being a woman in this Victorian large dress and whatever. And there was no, oh, stop with that nonsense. Just concentrate.
By the way, Samuel.
Yeah.
That's super gay.
That's super gay. That was super gay. I know.
So wait, your course supervisor let you explain your twitching leg by saying you were having a past life memory?
Well, I don't know. I didn't say that's why my leg is twitching, but it happened again and again, and then flank down. And then eventually he asked me like, what's going on? What are you thinking about? What is happening? Because you're supposed to be just present. You're not supposed to think about other things. You're just supposed to be there comfortably. And then I told him, well, this is what's going through my head. And then I think he made notes. I think he made note and ended up in my PC folder. I'm not sure. But, he acknowledged it. He didn't invalidate it. He didn't say, stop that. Just concentrate or keep your TRs, anything like that. He said, all right, understand, and try to stay in present time, try to stay here, and so on and so forth. And that was my only experience ever, memories or whatever of past lives.
Amazing. Marvelous. Well, Barbara has done an amazing job starring all these comments, and I have to say, I unfortunately have to go to the bathroom so bad I don't think I can take it anymore. And so, but this has been a really enjoyable conversation. Let's have many more of them.
Sure. Maybe we can do one where we answer the questions if there are, I don't know. I try not to look at the chat because I get a little bit anxious seeing how many people are there and how it goes. But that might be in.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what we should do. We're gonna let this interview sit here in season for a few days on YouTube.
Right.
I'll publish some breakout. I'll publish some breakout clips, and then let's you and I do a live Q&A together.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds cool.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Guys, if you've just recently joined us, Samuel's YouTube channel is the SP Chef. And absolutely, this has been a blast, you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, everyone. Thank you, as always, to everyone who watches until the very end. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay,
Thank
if
you,
you
guys.
want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, oh, Dandy Bummer, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye!